Hello and welcome back to goldstocktrades.com. Today we have a new and special guest with us, Stephen Twyrold. Stephen is CEO and president of Excelsior Mining, which can be traded as MIN on the TSX Venture and as EXMGF on the OTC. Thanks, Stephen, for being here with us today.
Thanks, Jeb.
Stephen, talk to us first about your background and how you came to be involved in the Excelsior Gunnison project.
Sure. Well, some of your listeners may have guessed from Australia, and I started in the mining industry as a geologist some 30 odd years ago on the Golden Mile in Kalgoorlie. And I've spent most of my career in operations, either underground, open pit, multi-commodity, and not just in Australia, but we had projects in Brazil, Peru, other places in the world, some work in Canada, and that kind of led me to start up a junior company back in sort of 2000 in Australia. And that was quite successful. We got a small nickel mine into production, and as a junior company, not many juniors actually get right through to production, but we were very successful in doing that in about 5 years. And eventually, that company was taken over, and we moved back to Phoenix because my wife is originally from Phoenix, so. Initially, we moved back just for family reasons. Her family hadn't seen their grandkids for some time while we'd been living in Australia. So we decided to bring them all back. And in Phoenix here, I met a gentleman called Jim Sullivan, and he and his family had owned this project for quite some time. I think he first got involved in the project in the 70s and had done a really good job of keeping all of the sort of information and data from the previous workers, and eventually he sort of consolidated the whole project that we have today into one ownership, which was his. And I met Jim through a friend of my wife's family, and he told me, he said, "Steve, I've got this really good copper project you need to look at." And I was a little skeptical at first. But in sort of late 2005, I was spending my time looking at his drill core and the rest of the documents and data. And it took me about 8 or 9 months to kind of be convinced that this was one of those exceptional projects that you don't come across very often. So ultimately, I did a deal with the Sullivan family, Mr. Sullivan and the rest of the family, and took an option over the project. Brought in one of the guys I know who used to work for Anglo American, Roland Goodgame, who's now our executive vice president. And he and I pretty much self-funded, got the project started. And then, from there, we did a reverse takeover of Excelsior, raised capital, and we've been putting our time and energy and money to good work since.
Stephen, you mentioned that this is a very unique copper project. Could be one of the best copper projects in the United States. Could you talk to us about what makes this project so unique, especially the low-cost economics?
Sure. Look, I think there are two things that make this project unique. Because it's one thing to have, technically and commercially one of the best projects, but it's also about location. Everything's about location. So if I talk a little bit about location first, we're down in Cochise County in southern Arizona or southeast Arizona. It's a great place to do business down there. It's kind of like a rural mining, agricultural, sort of defense-based economy down there, and quite unpopulated. It's got a fairly low population density, and if you had to pick a location to get a mining project up and running, this would be it. You have like access to the main freeway, the I-10 freeway. There's not many projects you can get off on the freeway exit, and you're sort of 500 feet from our front gate. So fantastic access from the freeway. We've got the Union Pacific Railroad running through the bottom of the project, so we've got rail access. We have high voltage power running right through the project already. We've got access to all the water that we need. So those type of things that you look for in a project, low population density, all the infrastructure you need, in a county or an economy that really appreciates the value of mining and what you can do to the local and state economy. So that makes us exceptional. We add to that the project itself, because we are doing what's called in situ mining or in situ recovery, and that involves drilling wells, sort of delivery wells and extraction wells, and a pattern of those to extract the copper where it is underground. Because we extract it underground, without having to, dig tunnels and dig open pits and all that, it means that our capital and operating costs are extremely low. So if you look at our metrics from a financial aspect, we are way down there on the bottom quartile on operating costs, probably about half the initial capital of an equivalent size mining operation. And that's all to us, and to me in the mining industry, that's about risk management. If you have a very big margin on your operating costs, then you're insulated to a large extent from fluctuations in copper price, and you're equally insulated from fluctuations in operating conditions, which every mine, every startup mine, has to go through. So it's really risk management when you've got metrics like that.
Stephen, there are a lot of deposits that don't make it to production, but Excelsior is pretty close to making it to commercial production. Could you talk to us about the next steps forward to get to commercial production?
Yeah, certainly. So before I do that, let's take a little bit of a step back. We've been moving this project forward for quite some time now, and we've probably put, dollars in the ground. It's probably close to $20 million by now. So we've been through, all of the stages, from the sort of startup, inferred resource, indicated resource, indicated and measured resource, and preliminary economic analysis, and then through the pre-fees. And so now we're going into the feasibility study. And through that whole process, the project has only looked better at each step. Part of that's because, the management team and myself are quite conservative. And so we make sure as we move forward that we don't overestimate the potential of the project. And that's allowed us to pretty much over-deliver on all of those steps. So going forward now, we are in the feasibility stage and in the permitting stage. We expect to submit our applications for our mining permits towards the end of this year. And as we run those permits through the regulatory process, we will in parallel complete the feasibility study. And once both of those are in hand, the feasibility and the permits, and we expect to have them, the feasibility towards the end of 2016 and then the permits in 2017, then it's simply a matter of construction and production.
Stephen, Excelsior is deeply discounted now, especially if you look at today's market cap versus the pre-feasibility NPV, net present value. Why should investors be looking at Excelsior now?
I think exactly that. We're at a very steep discount to what would normally be considered a fair valuation of the company. And I know, that the markets are tough at the moment and there's a lot of nervousness in the market. We have held our own against our peers quite well through the downturn. And part of the reason for that is not just the project itself and not just the capable management team, but the fact that we've been able to consistently access capital, even through the downturn when others have not been able to do that. And this is sort of sophisticated capital. It's private equity type capital that does not deploy their money without significant due diligence. And so, when you look at the risk of some of the junior mining companies, you sit back and think, well, are these guys going to get access to capital? Are they going to get funded? Are they going to keep moving forward? And, without exception, we've been able to do that, and we'll continue to be able to do that as we move the project forward, simply because of the quality of the team and the project.
Thank you, Stephen, for being here with us today and for giving us an introduction into Excelsior Mining, which can be traded as MIN on the TSX Venture and as EXMGF on the OTC.
Thanks, Jeb. And if you need anything else, just let me know.